The whiskey glass shattered against the floorboards, and Mara Vance didn't even flinch. She'd learned not to. Flinching meant weakness, and weakness in Red Hollow meant worse things than broken glass. The drunk miner who'd thrown it was already laughing, his friends slapping the table, their voices cutting through the saloon's thick haze of tobacco smoke and stale beer. Mara bent down, her knees protesting after 14 hours on her feet, and began picking up the pieces. "Leave it," barked Samuel, the saloon owner, from behind the bar. His face was red, perpetually angry. "Get back to work. Table 7's been waiting." Mara straightened, glass shards still glittering on the floor like broken promises. Her hands were raw, her back ached in places she didn't know existed anymore, and the forced smile she'd worn for the past 6 years felt like it might crack her face in half. But she nodded. She always nodded. Because 20 miles away, in a cramped room above the general store, her sister Emma lay dying. Not quickly, not mercifully. Slowly, the way consumption took people in towns like this, towns where doctors cost more than most people earned in a month, where medicine was a luxury and hope was something you couldn't afford to buy. Mara moved through this crowded saloon, her practiced smile fixed in place. The men didn't look at her face anyway. They never did. She was 24 years old and felt 50. Her dress, mended so many times the original fabric was more memory than material, hung loose on her frame. She'd stopped eating regularly 6 months ago. Emma needed the food more. "About time," growled the man at table 7. His companions, 3 other miners, their clothes still dusty from the day's work, leered at her as she approached. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" The word gentleman tasted like ash, but Samuel insisted on it. Manners, he said, kept the place respectable, as if anything in Red Hollow could be called respectable. "Whiskey, 4 glasses. And bring that bottle over here, sweetheart. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" The man grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Old man Carson finally kicked it. Mine's hiring." Mara felt something twist in her chest. She knew Carson's widow, knew his 3 children, knew they'd be in the streets by week's end. But she nodded, smiled, and walked away to fetch their whiskey. The saloon was packed tonight. It always was on Fridays when the mines paid out. Men with money burning holes in their pockets, desperate to forget the darkness underground, the friends who didn't make it out, the slow poison of dust settling in their lungs. They drank to forget, and Mara served them with a smile that forgot nothing. She'd been doing this since she was 18, since the cave-in that killed her father and 32 other men. Since the mine owners had shrugged and said accidents happen. Since her mother had drunk herself to death within a year, leaving Mara alone with a 12-year-old sister in debts that multiplied like rabbits. 6 years, 2,190 days of this. She'd counted every one. "Mara!" Samuel's voice again, sharp as a whip. "You deaf? Table 4 wants service." She grabbed the whiskey bottle, the cheap stuff that probably had more water than alcohol, and made her way back through the crowd. Someone grabbed her hip as she passed. She twisted away smoothly, practiced, not breaking stride. The man laughed. His friends laughed. No one stopped them. This was Red Hollow. This was life. The night ground on. More drinks. More leering faces. More hands that strayed too close. Mara's feet screamed with every step, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning. Around midnight, something changed. The saloon door opened, not unusual, but the man who walked through it was. He was tall, dressed in clothes that cost more than Mara made in 3 months. Dark coat, clean shirt, boots that had never seen the inside of a mine. His face was hard angles and careful control, somewhere in his early 30s, with eyes that swept the room like he was cataloging everything and finding it all wanting. The saloon didn't go quiet. It wasn't that kind of dramatic moment. But conversation shifted. Men glanced over, then away. There was something about the stranger that commanded space without demanding it. He chose a table in the corner, the quietest spot in the room. Sat down with his back to the wall like a man accustomed to watching for danger. "Mara," Samuel hissed. "Table 9. And be nice. That's money walking." She approached the stranger's table, her smile already in place. But when she got close enough to see his face properly, something made her pause. He was looking at her, actually looking, not at her body, not through her, but at her face, at her eyes. Like she was a person. It was so unusual that she almost forgot her lines. "Welcome to Samuel's," she managed. "What can I get you?" "Whiskey." His voice was low, controlled. The real stuff, if he has any. He does. Costs extra. I'd imagine it does. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. What's your name? Mara hesitated. Men didn't ask her name. They called her sweetheart or darling, or didn't call her anything at all. Mara. Cole Ashford. He didn't offer his hand. Men didn't shake hands with saloon girls. But he nodded, like her name mattered. She brought him the good whiskey, the bottle Samuel kept hidden for customers who could actually pay, and set it down carefully. Cole poured a glass, studied it, then looked up at her again. How long have you worked here? 6 years? Long time. Not long enough. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Exhaustion made her careless. But Cole didn't laugh or look offended. He just studied her with those careful eyes. You don't want to be here. No one wants to be here, Mr. Ashford. That's not how life works. How does life work, then? The question was absurd. She had 7 other tables waiting. Samuel was glaring daggers at her from across the room, and this wealthy stranger wanted to discuss philosophy. But something in his tone made her answer honestly. You survive. That's how it works. You wake up, you work, you go to sleep. You do it again the next day, and the day after that, until one day you don't. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's not living. That's dying slowly. Then I guess we're all dying slowly. She walked away before he could respond, before the conversation could go anywhere else. She had work to do, bills to pay, a sister who needed medicine. But she felt his eyes on her as she moved through the saloon, not leering, not judging, just watching, seeing. It unnerved her more than the grabbing hands ever did. The night dragged on. 2 fights broke out. Samuel handled them with a baseball bat he kept behind the bar. A man vomited in the corner. Another passed out at his table. The usual Friday night entertainment. Through it all, Cole sat in his corner, nursing his whiskey. He didn't drink much, didn't talk to anyone else, just watched the room with those calculating eyes. Around 2 in the morning, when the crowd finally thinned, Samuel dismissed her with a grunt and a handful of coins. Mara counted them automatically as she walked toward the back room to collect her shawl. Less than usual. Samuel had docked her for talking too long to customers. She was too tired to argue. The back room was tiny, barely more than a closet where Samuel stored extra bottles and the girls kept their things. Mara pulled her threadbare shawl around her shoulders and tried not to think about the long walk home, 2 miles through dark streets. She'd done it 1,000 times, but it never got easier, never got safer. Mara, she jumped. Cole Ashford stood in the doorway. Mr. Ashford. She kept her voice neutral, professional. Rule number 1, never be alone with a customer. The saloon's closing. You'll need to. I want to help you. The words hung in the air between them. Mara's exhausted mind struggled to process them. Excuse me? Your sister, Emma. She's sick. The world tilted. How do you know about Emma? I make it my business to know things. Cole's voice was matter-of-fact. Consumption. She's been ill for 8 months. You've been working double shifts trying to pay for her medicine. It's not enough. Fear and fury warred in Mara's chest. Who are you? What do you want? I told you I want to help. Nobody helps in Red Hollow, not without strings. There are no strings. There are always strings. Mara's voice cracked. She was so tired, too tired for this. Every man who's ever offered to help me wanted the same thing, so just say it. Get it over with. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or anger. I don't want that. I want to pay for Emma's treatment. A real doctor. Medicine. Whatever she needs. Why? Because you shouldn't have to watch your sister die because you don't have money. It was too much. The exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope she'd trained herself not to feel, it all crashed over her at once. Mara's knees gave out. She caught herself against the wall, breathing hard. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I don't know what it costs, what you'll want later. Cole stepped closer, but didn't touch her. What do you want, Mara? Forget about cost. Forget about strings. If you could have anything, what would it be? The question should have been meaningless. Fantasy. But standing there in that cramped back room, with 6 years of survival weighing on her shoulders and a stranger offering the impossible, Mara answered honestly. Just one day to breathe. One day where I'm not terrified, where I don't have to smile at men who see me as furniture, where Emma isn't dying and I'm not drowning and everything isn't so, her voice broke, so goddamn heavy. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Okay. Okay, what? I'll give you that day. Mara laughed, bitter and broken. You can't give someone a day, Mr. Ashford. That's not how the world works. Let me try. He pulled something from his pocket. Money. More money than Mara had seen in months. He set it on the small table beside her. For Emma's doctor. No strings, no repayment, just take it. Then he walked away. Mara stared at the money, her hands shaking. It could be real. Emma could see a real doctor, could get real medicine, could have a chance. But nothing in Red Hollow came without cost. Nothing. She picked up the bills with trembling fingers and hurried out of the saloon. Cole was already gone, disappeared into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. The street was empty except for the usual drunks and shadows. Mara walked home with the money pressed against her chest, terrified someone would attack her, rob her, take away this impossible gift. But she made it to the cramped room above the general store without incident. Emma was asleep, her breathing rattling in her chest. She looked so small in the bed, so fragile. 16 years old and already half ghost, Mara sat beside her, counting the money again and again, making sure it was real. It was. More than real. Enough for a doctor, enough for medicine, enough for hope. She didn't sleep that night, couldn't. Just sat watching Emma breathe and wondering what Cole Ashford would want in return for the miracle he'd just given her. Because in Red Hollow, miracles always had a price. The doctor came 3 days later. Mara had waited, terrified Cole would change his mind, that the money would disappear, that she'd wake up and find it had all been a fever dream. But the bills were real, solid, and when she'd gone to the expensive doctor on the other side of town, the one who treated mine owners and merchants, he'd agreed to see Emma. Dr. Harrison was a stern man with gray hair and careful hands. He examined Emma for over an hour while Mara stood in the corner, hardly daring to breathe. She's very ill, he said finally, but not beyond help. I'll need to see her twice a week. This prescription needs to be filled immediately. The medicine won't cure her, but it will stabilize her condition. Give her body a chance to fight back. How much? Mara's voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Harrison named a sum that would have been impossible a week ago, but with Cole's money, it was manageable. Barely. I'll need payment every visit, the doctor continued. If you miss one, I won't miss any. Mara's voice was steel. The doctor studied her for a moment, then nodded. See that you don't. This girl's life depends on it. After he left, Mara sank into the chair beside Emma's bed. Her sister's eyes fluttered open, clearer than they'd been in months. Mara? Emma's voice was weak but present. Was that Dr. Harrison? Yes. How did we afford him? Mara hesitated. She hadn't told Emma about Cole. Hadn't told anyone. The whole thing felt too strange, too fragile, like talking about it might make it disappear. I had some money saved. It was a lie, and Emma probably knew it, but she was too weak to argue. She just squeezed Mara's hand and closed her eyes again. That night, Mara returned to Samuel's saloon with a strange mixture of gratitude and dread. She needed to keep working. Dr. Harrison's fees would eat through Cole's money eventually, and Emma needed food, rent, firewood. But she also knew she'd have to face Cole again, would have to find out what he really wanted. The saloon was moderately busy, not Friday night chaos, but steady. Mara moved through her routine automatically, serving drinks, dodging hands, smiling until her face hurt. Cole wasn't there. She told herself she was relieved. But part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was disappointed. He came back 2 nights later. Same table in the corner, same expensive clothes, same careful eyes that seemed to see too much. Mara approached with her practiced smile, but her hands were shaking slightly. Mr. Ashford. Mara. How's Emma? Better? The word caught in her throat. The doctor says, He says she has a chance. Good. She set down his whiskey, the good bottle, without being asked, and waited. For the demand. For the price. For whatever he really wanted. But Cole just nodded his thanks and took a sip. Mara stood there, uncertain. Mr. Ashford, I need to know. Cole. Just Cole. Fine. Cole. I need to know what you want, what this costs. I told you. Nothing. That's not possible. Nobody. Mara! Samuel's voice cut through the saloon. Table 6 is waiting. She hurried away, frustrated and confused. The rest of the night passed in a blur. When she glanced at Cole's table, he was always there, watching the room with those calculating eyes. Watching her. It should have felt creepy. But it didn't. It felt safe. Like having someone see her as more than furniture made her more than furniture. The pattern continued. Cole came to the saloon 3 or 4 times a week. Always the same table. Always watching. They didn't talk much. Samuel wouldn't allow it. But sometimes when Mara brought his whiskey, Cole would ask about Emma. And sometimes she'd answer honestly. She's eating again. The medicine is working. She smiled today, really smiled. Cole never pushed for more conversation. Never demanded her time or attention. Just listened and nodded, like Emma's recovery mattered to him personally. It was the strangest relationship Mara had ever had, if it could even be called a relationship. Then, 3 weeks after their first meeting, everything changed. It was another Friday night. The saloon was packed, rowdy, dangerous. Mara was exhausted. She'd been working a double shift because one of the other girls had quit without notice. Her feet were bleeding inside her worn shoes, and her smile had cracked hours ago. She was serving table 3 when one of the miners, a regular named Dawson, mean drunk and meaner sober, grabbed her wrist. Sit with us, sweetheart. I can't, I'm working. I said sit. He yanked her down onto his lap. His friends laughed. Mara's heart hammered. She'd handled this before. You laughed it off, made a joke, extracted yourself carefully. Never made them angry. Never made a scene. Come on, Dawson, let me up. Samuel will have my head. Samuel can wait. Dawson's hand slid up her leg. Let go. Mara's voice was hard now. Forget the smile. Forget being nice. Make me. The table erupted in laughter. Mara tried to stand, but Dawson held her tight. His other hand grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. You think you're too good for us? Walking around here like you're something special. Let her go. The voice cut through the noise like a knife. Cold, controlled, absolutely certain. Cole stood 3 feet away, his expression unchanged, but his presence suddenly filling the entire space. Dawson laughed. Mind your business, fancy man. I'm making it my business. Let her go. Or what? Cole didn't answer. He just looked at Dawson with those careful eyes, and something in his expression made the entire table go quiet. Dawson's grip loosened, just slightly. Mara wrenched herself free and stumbled backward. Cole caught her elbow, steadying her. You all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Dawson stood up, his face red with anger and embarrassment. You think you can come in here and... I think you should apologize to the lady and sit down. Lady? Dawson spat. She's a saloon girl. Something flickered across Cole's face. Something dangerous. She's a woman who deserves respect. Apologize. The saloon had gone quiet now. Samuel was moving toward them, baseball bat in hand, but Cole raised a hand, stopping him. I'm waiting, Cole said quietly. Dawson looked at his friends, looked at the crowd, looked at Cole's expensive clothes and calm certainty. Something in him recognized he was outmatched, not physically, but in every way that mattered. Sorry, he muttered. Say it to her. Dawson's jaw clenched, but he turned to Mara. Sorry. It wasn't sincere, but it was enough. Cole nodded. Sit down. Dawson sat. His friend sat. The saloon slowly returned to life, conversations resuming, the moment passing. But everything had changed. Cole guided Mara away from the table, his hand light on her elbow. You okay? He asked again, quieter now. Yes. Thank you. Don't thank me. His voice was tight. You shouldn't have to deal with that. It's part of the job. It shouldn't be. Samuel appeared, his face thunderous. Mara, back to work. Mr. Ashford, I appreciate what you did, but I run this establishment. Then run it better. Cole's voice was still controlled, but there was iron underneath. If I see anyone put their hands on her again, I'll make sure this place is shut down by morning. Understood?" Samuel's face went through several shades of red, but he knew when he was beaten. "Understood." Cole turned back to Mara. "Take a break. Sit down." "I can't. Sit down." It wasn't a command. It was a request that sounded like care. Mara, too shaken to argue, sat at Cole's table. He poured her a glass of whiskey. "Drink." She did. It burned going down, but the warmth helped steady her. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mara spoke, her voice barely audible over the saloon noise. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "All of it. Emma's doctor, standing up to Dawson, acting like I matter." Cole was quiet for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was carefully neutral. "Because you do matter, and because I know what it's like when nobody sees you." "You?" Mara almost laughed. "Look at you. Look at your clothes, your money, the way everyone defers to you. How could you possibly—" "Money doesn't mean people see you." Cole's voice was hard now. "It just means they see what they want from you." Mara studied his face. Behind the careful control, she saw something familiar, something tired, something that understood survival. "Who are you really?" she asked. "Someone who's made mistakes, someone who's trying to do better." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Samuel was glaring at them from across the saloon. Mara knew she needed to get back to work, but she didn't move. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "You don't have to." "But I want to." Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and for just a moment his careful mask slipped. She saw exhaustion there, and loneliness, and something else, something that looked like hope but was afraid to be. "Maybe someday," he said quietly, "when I deserve it." Before Mara could ask what that meant, Samuel barked her name again. She stood reluctantly. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet." There was something ominous in those words, but before Mara could question it, Cole was standing, leaving money on the table, far more than his whiskey cost, and walking toward the door. She watched him go, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't ask and answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. That night, walking home through the dark streets, Mara realized something terrifying. She was starting to trust Cole Ashford, starting to believe his help might actually be free, starting to feel something that wasn't just gratitude. And in Red Hollow, feelings like that were more dangerous than any drunk miner with grabbing hands. Because sooner or later, Cole would leave. Or he'd want something she couldn't give. Or the truth about who he really was would come out and shatter whatever fragile connection was building between them. That's how these things always ended. Mara knew that. But when she climbed the stairs to her cramped room and found Emma sitting up in bed, actually sitting up, reading a book by candlelight, her sister's face fuller than it had been in months. Maybe endings didn't matter. Maybe survival wasn't just about lasting. Maybe it was about taking the moments of light when they came, even if you knew the darkness was waiting. Mara sat beside Emma, and for the first time in 6 years, she let herself hope. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was the beginning of something that would either save her or destroy her completely. And somewhere across town, in a rented room at Red Hollow's only hotel, Cole Ashford stood at his window and looked out at the dark streets. His hands were shaking, something they rarely did anymore. His carefully controlled expression was finally cracking. Because standing up to Dawson had felt good. Helping Emma had felt necessary. Watching Mara's hope return had felt like redemption. But redemption required truth. And the truth was going to shatter everything. Cole poured himself a drink and tried to prepare for the moment when Mara learned who he really was. What his family had done. Why he'd really come to Red Hollow. He told himself it was about making things right, about accountability, about being better than his father had been. But standing in that saloon, watching Mara fight through exhaustion with a strength that put his expensive clothes and easy money to shame, Cole had realized something that made his carefully laid plans infinitely more complicated. He was falling for her. And when she found out the truth, that his family's greed had caused the cave-in that killed her father, that his money was built on the suffering of people like her, she would hate him. She should hate him. But for just a few more weeks, before the truth destroyed everything, Cole let himself pretend that a man like him could deserve a woman like Mara Vance. It was the kindest lie he'd ever told himself, and the cruelest, The weeks that followed moved like a slow thaw after a brutal winter. Emma's improvement wasn't miraculous. Nothing in Red Hollow ever was. But it was real. She could sit up for hours now, even walk around the small room without losing her breath. The color had returned to her cheeks, and with it, something Mara had thought lost forever, her sister's laugh. "You're hovering again," Emma said one morning, looking up from the book Cole had sent over. He'd started doing that, leaving small gifts at the general store with instructions to deliver them upstairs. Books for Emma. A warmer shawl for Mara. Always anonymous, though they both knew who they were from. "I'm not hovering. I'm sitting." "You're sitting 3 feet away, watching me like I might disappear if you blink." Emma's smile was gentle. "I'm okay, Mara. Really." Mara wanted to believe her, but 6 years of watching Emma fade had carved grooves of fear too deep to fill with a few weeks of medicine. "Dr. Harrison said you need rest." "Dr. Harrison also said I need fresh air and sunlight, which means you need to stop treating me like I'm made of glass and let me live a little." The word live hit Mara harder than it should have. When had survival stopped being enough? When had she started wanting more than just making it through each day? She knew the answer. She just didn't want to admit it. "Fine," Mara said, standing, "but you stay in this room. No going downstairs. And if you feel tired, I'll rest, I promise." Emma's expression turned serious. "Mara, who is he?" "Who?" "Don't play dumb. The man paying for all this. The one sending gifts. The one you won't talk about." Mara busied herself straightening blankets that didn't need straightening. "Just someone trying to help." "Nobody helps for free in Red Hollow." "I know." "So what does he want?" "I don't know." The words came out sharper than intended. "That's what scares me." Emma was quiet for a moment, then softly, "Maybe he just wants to help. Maybe not everyone is terrible." "Everyone is terrible. They're just terrible in different ways. That's a sad way to see the world. It's the only way that keeps you breathing in this one." But even as Mara said it, she felt the lie in her bones. Because Cole kept coming to the saloon, kept watching with those careful eyes, and never once asked for anything in return. Never pushed, never demanded, just existed in her peripheral vision like a promise she was afraid to believe. That night at the saloon, the routine felt different. Mara moved through her work with the same practiced efficiency, but her awareness had shifted. She knew when Cole walked through the door before she saw him. Knew which table he'd choose. Knew he'd order the good whiskey and nurse it slowly while watching the room, watching her. "You're distracted," Samuel growled as Mara passed the bar. "Whatever's going on with you and Mr. Moneybags, keep it out of my establishment." "Nothing's going on." "Right. And I'm the King of England." Samuel leaned closer, his breath sour. "Listen, girl. Men like that don't come to places like this without wanting something. When he finally asks, you better say yes, or you're out on the street. Understood?" Mara's stomach turned, but she nodded. She couldn't afford to lose this job, especially now with Emma's treatment ongoing. Dr. Harrison's fees were manageable with Cole's money, but that money wouldn't last forever. She needed every penny she could earn. She approached Cole's table with her usual smile, but something in her expression must have given her away because his eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. What can I get you?" "The truth would be nice." Mara almost laughed. "The truth isn't on the menu." "Then I'll order off menu." She should have walked away, should have kept the professional distance that had kept her safe for 6 years. But exhaustion and fear and the strange pull of Cole's presence made her reckless. "Samuel thinks you want something from me," she said quietly, setting down his whiskey. "He's probably right." "He's not." "Then why are you here? Why keep coming back?" Cole took a slow sip of his drink. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure anymore." The answer was so unexpected that Mara forgot to maintain her guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I came here with a purpose, a clear plan. But somewhere along the way, the plan got complicated." "By what?" "By you." The words hung between them like smoke. Mara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not complicated. I'm exhausted and broke and trying to keep my sister alive, that's all." "That's everything." Before Mara could respond, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She turned to find Dawson standing there, his face already flushed with alcohol. "Need a refill," he slurred, shoving his empty glass at her. Mara took it automatically, her body tensing. Since the incident 3 weeks ago, Dawson had kept his distance. But drunk men had short memories. Right away, she said, trying to step past him. He blocked her path. You think you're too good for us now? Got yourself a rich man buying you pretty things? Let her go, Dawson. Cole's voice was quiet, but it cut through the saloon noise. Wasn't talking to you, fancy man. I'm talking to you. Move. Dawson's hand tightened on Mara's shoulder. Make me. Cole stood slowly, his movements controlled but purposeful. He was taller than Dawson, broader through the shoulders, and something in his bearing suggested he knew how to handle himself. Last chance, Cole said. Dawson let go, but his face twisted with spite. You think your money makes you better than us? You think we don't know what you are? Something flickered across Cole's face. Careful. Your family killed those men. 33 workers dead because the Ashfords were too cheap to shore up the tunnels properly, and now you come here throwing money around like that makes it right. Stop. Cole's voice was sharp now, urgent, but Dawson was drunk and angry and reckless. Her daddy died in that collapse. Did you tell her that? Did you tell her your money's built on his corpse? The saloon went quiet. Mara felt the words hit her like physical blows. She looked at Cole, waiting for him to deny it, waiting for him to say Dawson was lying, was making it up, was just a drunk fool talking nonsense. But Cole's face had gone ashen, his carefully controlled expression cracked, and beneath it she saw guilt so raw it was almost visible. Mara, he started. She stepped back. Is it true? Let me explain. Is it true? Cole closed his eyes. When he opened them again, all the careful distance was gone. What remained was naked honesty, and it destroyed her. Yes. The saloon erupted. Voices rising, people standing, Samuel shouting for order, but Mara heard none of it. The roaring in her ears drowned out everything except that single word. Yes. The man who'd saved Emma, who'd paid for her medicine, who'd stood up to Dawson and sent books and made Mara feel seen for the first time in 6 years. That man's family had killed her father. You knew. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. This whole time, you knew who I was. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I tried. I wanted to. But every time I started, Cole's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mara. I'm so sorry. Sorry? The word tasted like poison. You're sorry? She grabbed the whiskey bottle from his table and threw it. Not at him. She wasn't trying to hit him, but at the wall behind him. It shattered spectacularly, amber liquid running down the wood paneling. Samuel was shouting now, pushing through the crowd. That's enough. Mara, get out. You're fired. Fine. Mara's voice was eerily calm. She looked at Cole one more time, memorizing the guilt on his face. Stay away from me. Stay away from Emma. We don't want your blood money. Mara, please. I said stay away. She walked out of the saloon into the cold night air. Her hands were shaking. Her chest felt too tight. Behind her, she could hear Cole calling her name, but she didn't turn around, didn't stop. Just kept walking through the dark streets with tears streaming down her face and 6 years of survival crumbling behind her. Her father's face flickered through her mind, strong, laughing, lifting her onto his shoulders, promising her everything would be okay, then disappearing underground one morning and never coming back. She'd been 18, old enough to know better than to believe promises, old enough to understand that in towns like Red Hollow, men died and families suffered and the people responsible never paid. Except Cole had paid, was still paying. The money he'd given her, Emma's treatment, the medicine keeping her sister alive, it came from his family, from the mine that killed her father. Mara wanted to throw it all away, wanted to storm back to the saloon and shove every penny in Cole's face and tell him to take his guilt and his money and his careful eyes and leave Red Hollow forever. But Emma was upstairs in their cramped room, breathing easily for the first time in months. Emma was alive because of that money, because of Cole. The realization made Mara sick. She reached their building and climbed the stairs slowly, her legs suddenly heavy. Inside, Emma was already asleep, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The medication bottle stood on the small table beside her bed. Dr. Harrison's bill sat tucked under the lamp, all of it paid for by the family that had killed their father. Mara sank into the chair and put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was too empty for tears. Just sat there as the hours passed and the candle burned down and Emma slept peacefully, unaware that the miracle keeping her alive was also a betrayal. Morning came gray and cold. Emma woke slowly, stretching. "You're up early," she said, then stopped. "Mara, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "I lost my job." Emma sat up quickly. "What? Why?" "Doesn't matter." Mara's voice was flat. "I'll find something else." "Was it that man, the one helping us?" Mara's silence was answer enough. "What happened?" "I found out who he is." Mara forced herself to look at Emma. "His family owns the mine. The one that—" She couldn't finish. Emma's face went white. "Oh, yeah." They sat in heavy silence. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice small. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know." "The medicine? I know." "Mara, I don't want to die." The words broke something in Mara's chest. She crossed to the bed and wrapped her arms around Emma, holding her sister like she could physically keep death away. "You're not going to die, I promise. But without the medicine, I'll figure something out. I always do." It was a lie. They both knew it, but sometimes lies were all you had. The next few days were brutal. Mara tried every establishment in Red Hollow looking for work. The answer was always the same. "No openings, try again next month, we'll keep you in mind." Word had spread about her throwing that bottle. Samuel had made sure of it. She pawned her mother's wedding ring, sold the few nice things they owned, stretched every penny until it screamed. But Dr. Harrison's next appointment was in 4 days, and she was still short. On the third day, someone knocked on their door. Mara opened it to find a boy of maybe 12 holding an envelope. "For Miss Vance," he said, then ran off before she could ask questions. Inside the envelope was money, exact amount for Dr. Harrison's fee. No note, no explanation. Mara stood in the doorway, staring at the bills in her hand. She knew who they were from. Knew she should throw them away, burn them, anything but accept them. But Emma was behind her, coughing again. The medicine was running out. Mara closed the door and put the money in her pocket. That night she walked to Red Hollow's only hotel. The clerk recognized her. Everyone knew everyone in a town this small, and his eyebrows rose. "Looking for someone?" "Cole Ashford. Which room?" "Room 12, second floor." Mara climbed the stairs, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she was going to say, didn't know if she was here to thank him or scream at him or both. She knocked. Cole opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, his expensive clothes wrinkled. "Mara, I need to talk to you." He stepped back, letting her in. The room was sparse but clean. Papers covered the desk. A half-empty whiskey bottle sat beside them. "I got your money," Mara said, not sitting down. "Good. Emma needs—" "Why are you doing this?" Cole ran a hand through his hair. "I told you, I want to help." "That's not an answer. Help why? Guilt? Pity? Some twisted sense of obligation?" "All of it." Cole's voice was raw. "All of it and more." "I don't understand." "Neither do I." He laughed bitterly. "I came here to make restitution. My father died 6 months ago, and going through his papers, I found evidence of what he'd done. The shortcuts, the bribed inspectors, the 33 men who died because profit mattered more than safety." He gestured at the papers on the desk. "I've been tracking down the families, trying to make things right. You can't make this right. I know, but I have to try." Mara looked at the papers more closely. Lists of names, addresses, amounts paid out. Her father's name was there, circled in red. "You've been doing this the whole time?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me because I'm a coward." Cole's voice was flat. "Because I liked the way you looked at me before you knew. Because for a few weeks, I got to pretend I wasn't the son of a man who valued money over human life." The honesty was almost painful. Mara wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than this complicated mess of emotions churning in her chest. "The money you gave me," she said slowly. "It's mine. Not charity. Not guilt. It's what your family owed my father." Yes. And Emma's treatment is the least of what you're entitled to. Mara's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, her mind spinning. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything. Yes, I do. She looked up at him. Because Emma's alive, because of you. Because you could have just sent money anonymously and disappeared, but you didn't. You came here. You sat in that saloon night after night. You stood up to Dawson. Her voice broke. You made me feel like I mattered. You do matter. Stop saying that like you know me. I do know you. Cole's voice was fierce now. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for your sister. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know you smile even when you're breaking and fight, even when you're terrified, and somehow, despite everything this town has done to you, you haven't let it kill the good parts. There are no good parts left. That's a lie. Cole crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, not touching, just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Mara, I know you hate me. You should hate me. But please, let me keep helping Emma, not for me, for her. I can't afford to hate you. The words tasted bitter. That's what makes this so awful. You're tied to the worst moment of my life, but you're also tied to the best thing that's happened since. And I don't know how to reconcile that. You don't have to. Just let me help. Why do you care so much? Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm tired of being my father's son. Because I've spent my whole life watching people suffer so my family could profit, and I never did anything to stop it. Because when I look at you, I see what courage actually looks like, and it makes me ashamed of every comfortable choice I've ever made. He paused, then continued. And because somewhere in the last few weeks, helping Emma stopped being about guilt and started being about something else entirely. What? You? The word hung between them. Mara's breath caught. That's not fair, she said. I know. You can't say things like that after everything. I know that too. Mara stood abruptly. I should go. Will you take the money? She wanted to say no, wanted to throw it in his face and storm out and never see him again. But Emma's rattling cough echoed in her memory. Yes. Will you let me keep helping? I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. No. Mara's voice was hard. People like you have choices. People like me have survival. She walked to the door, then stopped with her hand on the handle. Cole? Yes? The things you said. About me mattering. About seeing courage. She didn't turn around. Don't say them again. Because I want to believe them, and that's dangerous. Why? Because men like you don't stay in towns like this, and women like me don't get happy endings. She opened the door. Emma has an appointment in 2 days. I'll need money for the medicine. I'll send it. Good. Mara left before he could say anything else. She walked home through the dark streets with his words echoing in her head and her heart doing complicated things she couldn't afford. Emma was awake when she returned, sitting up in bed with one of Cole's books. Did you see him? She asked. Yes. And? And we're going to keep accepting his help, because you need it. Mara, no arguments. You're going to live, Emma. I don't care what it costs me. Emma studied her sister's face. What if the cost is too high? There is no cost too high for your life. Even if it means forgiving the unforgivable? Mara sank onto the edge of the bed. I'm not forgiving anything. I'm just surviving differently. That sounds exhausting. Everything about our life is exhausting. Emma reached out and took Mara's hand. Maybe it doesn't have to be. What do you mean? Maybe there's something between survival and happy endings. Something messy and complicated but real. You've been reading too many books. Or you haven't been reading enough. Despite everything, Mara smiled. When did you get so wise? Around the time I stopped dying. Emma squeezed her hand. Mara, I know this is hard, but maybe Cole isn't the enemy. His family killed our father. His father killed our father. There's a difference. Is there? I think so. Otherwise, we're just replaying the same pain forever. Mara wanted to argue, but exhaustion and confusion and the memory of Cole's voice saying you matter made everything blur together. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither does he, probably. Maybe that's okay. Nothing about this is okay. No, Emma agreed. But it's real and messy, and maybe that's better than nothing. Mara lay down beside her sister, both of them staring at the ceiling. I'm scared, Mara whispered. Of what? That I'm starting to care about him, and that when this all falls apart, because it will fall apart, it's going to hurt worse than anything else ever has. Emma was quiet. Then, what if it doesn't fall apart? Things like this always fall apart. Maybe, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they become something neither person expected. That sounds like one of your books talking. Maybe books know things we don't. They fell asleep like that, sisters in the dark, both hoping for things they were afraid to name. Across town, Cole sat at his desk with a pen in his hand and paper in front of him. He'd been trying to write a letter for hours, trying to explain everything he couldn't say in person, but words felt inadequate. How did you apologize for inheriting guilt? How did you ask forgiveness for sins that weren't technically yours but shaped your entire existence? How did you tell someone you'd fallen for them when falling was the most selfish thing you could do? Cole set down the pen and picked up his whiskey glass. The papers in front of him showed his progress. 21 families contacted, restitution paid, lives marginally improved. But none of it mattered as much as the look on Mara's face when she'd realized who he was. He should leave Red Hollow. He'd done what he came to do. Emma would be fine. He'd arranged for her treatment to continue for the next 2 years, fully paid. Mara would find new work eventually. They'd survive. But leaving felt wrong in ways Cole couldn't articulate. Because somewhere in the last few weeks, Red Hollow had stopped being a box to check on his guilt-driven list and started being the place where Mara lived. And Mara had stopped being just another name on his father's list of victims and started being the first person in years who made Cole want to be better than he was. He knew it was selfish, knew staying would only make things more complicated, but when had he ever chosen the selfless path before? Cole drained his whiskey and made a decision. He was staying, not to push, not to demand, just to be there, to help when needed, to prove through actions what words couldn't convey. He was staying because Mara Vance had looked him in the eye and called him out on every privileged assumption he'd ever made, and instead of being offended, he'd felt more alive than he had in years. He was staying because maybe, just maybe, redemption wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up day after day and doing the work even when it hurt. He was staying because leaving would be easier, and Cole was tired of taking the easy path, so he'd stay. And he'd help. And he'd wait to see if forgiveness was possible for a man whose greatest sin was being born into the wrong family. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was honest. And honesty was the only currency that mattered anymore. The arrangement that followed wasn't comfortable. It wasn't clean. It was survival wearing the mask of something almost civilized, and both Mara and Cole knew it. Money arrived every week in unmarked envelopes, always the exact amount needed for Emma's treatment and nothing more. Mara accepted it because refusing meant watching her sister die, and that was a price even her pride couldn't pay. But each envelope felt like swallowing glass. Cole kept his distance. He didn't return to the saloon. Mara heard through town gossip that he'd moved to a house on the edge of Red Hollow, something small and unremarkable. He was still around, still in town, but he didn't push into her space. Somehow that made it worse. 2 weeks after their confrontation, Mara found work at the general store. The pay was terrible, the hours were long, and the owner's wife watched her like she might steal something. But it was honest work, and after Samuel's saloon, honest felt like luxury. Emma continued improving, slowly, frustratingly slowly, but improving. She could walk around the room now without collapsing, could eat full meals, could laugh without coughing until she saw stars. You should talk to him, Emma said one evening as Mara measured out her medicine. I talk to him when necessary. You know what I mean. There's nothing to say. Mara concentrated on getting the dosage exact. Dr. Harrison had been very clear about measurements. You're miserable. I've been miserable for 6 years. This is nothing new. That's not true, and you know it. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. Before, you were surviving. Now you're just stuck. Mara set down the medicine bottle harder than intended. What do you want me to say, Em? That I forgive him? That I'm grateful? That I don't lie awake at night trying to reconcile the man who saved you with the family that killed our father? I want you to be honest about what you're feeling. I don't know what I'm feeling. That's the problem. Emma reached for her sister's hand. Maybe you should figure it out. Why? What difference does it make? Because I'm getting better, Mara. And when I'm well enough, we could leave Red Hollow, start over somewhere else. But you won't go, will you? Because of him. The accusation hung in the air. Mara wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in her throat. I hate him, she said finally. No, you don't. I should hate him. That's different. Mara pulled her hand away and stood, moving to the small window that overlooked Red Hollow's main street. Outside, the town was settling into evening, lamps being lit, shops closing. The same routine that had played out for years, for decades, probably for as long as this miserable place had existed. He wrote to the territorial governor, she said quietly. Emma sat up straighter. What? I heard about it at the store. Mrs. Henderson was gossiping with Mrs. Price. Cole wrote to the territorial governor demanding an investigation into the mine collapse. He submitted his father's papers as evidence, documents showing the bribes, the shortcuts, everything. When? 3 weeks ago, before anyone knew who he was. Emma was quiet for a moment. That's not nothing. It doesn't bring father back. No, but it's more than anyone else has done. It's guilt. Maybe. But guilt that actually does something is better than guilt that just sits there. Mara pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I don't know how to separate him from what his family did. Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe that's something he has to carry, and you just have to decide if you can stand next to someone carrying that weight. When did you become a philosopher? When I stopped dying and started paying attention. Emma's smile was soft. Mara, I'm not telling you to forgive him or trust him or anything like that. I'm just saying, maybe you could talk to him. Actually talk. Because whatever's happening between you two, it's not finished. It should be finished. But it's not. Mara didn't have an answer for that. The next day at the general store, Mara was sorting through a shipment of dry goods when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Cole stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking as uncomfortable as she felt. Miss Vance? He said formally. Mr. Ashford. The store owner, Mr. Peterson, appeared from the back room, his expression shifting from suspicion to something resembling respect when he saw Cole. Mr. Ashford, what can I do for you? Just need some supplies. Cole's eyes flicked to Mara, then away. And I'd like to speak with Miss Vance, briefly, if she's willing. Mr. Peterson looked between them, clearly torn between deference to wealth and suspicion of anything that might cause trouble. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes. We're a respectable establishment. Cole's jaw tightened slightly, but he just nodded. Of course. Mara set down the bag of flour she'd been holding and walked to the corner of the store where they could have some semblance of privacy. Cole followed, keeping a careful distance. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I didn't mean to ambush you at work, but I needed to tell you something, and I couldn't figure out how else. He stopped, frustrated with himself. The governor's office responded. Mara's heart jumped. And? They're opening an investigation. Federal investigators will arrive next month to review the mine operations in my father's records. If they find what I think they'll find, there will be prosecutions. The mine operators who took bribes, the inspectors who looked the other way, they'll face charges. Your father's already dead. Yes, but his partners aren't. The men who helped him cut corners and pocket the difference, they're still running mines all over the territory, still putting workers at risk. Cole's voice was tight. I can't bring back the men who died, but I can try to stop it from happening again. Mara studied his face, looking for the lie, the performance, but all she saw was exhaustion and determination. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a right to know. Because your father's death is part of this investigation. He paused. And because I need you to understand that I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I know I can't. But I can try to make the system that killed your father actually face consequences. That won't bring him back. Nothing will. But maybe it means something that the truth comes out. That people know what really happened. Mara wanted to stay angry. Anger was simpler than the complicated mess of emotions churning in her chest. But standing there in the general store, looking at Cole's haggard face and remembering Emma's words about guilt that actually does something, she felt her defenses crack. Mr. Ashford? Cole. Please. Cole. The name felt strange on her tongue. I don't know what you want from me. Nothing. I want nothing from you. Everyone wants something. Then I want you to stop looking at me like I'm my father. His voice was raw. I know I can't change what he did. I know his blood runs in my veins and his money paid for everything I own. But I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to do better. And I need you to see that, even if you can't forgive it. Why does it matter what I see? Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you're the only person in my entire life who's ever looked at me and seen past the money, past the name. You saw me as just a man, and when you found out the truth, I watched that die in your eyes. I watched you start seeing the Ashford name instead. What did you expect? Exactly what happened, but that doesn't make it hurt less. The honesty was disarming. Mara felt her carefully maintained anger wavering. I need time, she said finally. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. That's what scares me. Something like understanding crossed Cole's face. I know. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat loudly from across the store. Time's up. Cole nodded, then looked at Mara one more time. Emma's appointment is tomorrow. The money will be there. It always is. It always will be. No matter what happens between us, that doesn't change. Emma deserves to live, and I have the means to make that happen. Those two facts aren't connected to anything else. He left before Mara could respond, the bell chiming as the door closed behind him. Mr. Peterson appeared at her elbow. That man sweet on you? No. Could have fooled me. He looked at you like you were the only thing in the room. He was just delivering a message. Right, and I'm the territorial governor. Mr. Peterson shook his head. Be careful with that one, Mara. Men with that much money don't think like the rest of us. I'm not planning anything with him. Plans and what actually happens are two different things. Mara returned to her work, but her hands were shaking slightly. Because Mr. Peterson was right, and Emma was right, and even Cole's brutal honesty was right. She couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop the way her heart jumped when she saw him, couldn't stop comparing every other man in Red Hollow to someone who saw her as human instead of furniture. And that was terrifying, because caring about Cole Ashford meant caring about someone whose very existence was tied to the worst moment of her life. It meant trying to separate the man from his heritage, and Mara didn't know if that was even possible. That night, Emma's condition took a turn. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't collapse or cough blood or anything that would make sense in a story. She just got tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of tired that came from fighting too long. Dr. Harrison examined her with his usual thoroughness, then pulled Mara aside. The medicine is working, but her body is still very weak. She needs rest. Real rest. Not this. He gestured at their cramped room with its thin walls and constant noise from the street below. Somewhere quiet, clean air, good food. I can't afford that. I know, but it's what she needs. Dr. Harrison's expression softened slightly. I've seen cases like this before. The medicine can only do so much. The rest is about environment, about having the space and peace to actually heal. After he left, Mara sat beside Emma's bed, her mind racing. Quiet places cost money they didn't have. Even with Cole's help covering the medicine, their daily expenses ate through Mara's wages from the store. There was nothing left for luxuries like rest and clean air. Emma's eyes fluttered open. I heard. You should be sleeping. I heard what Dr. Harrison said about needing a better place. Don't worry about it. We'll figure something out. Mara, I said we'll figure it out. But that night, lying on the floor beside Emma's bed because the room was too small for two, Mara stared at the ceiling and admitted the truth. She couldn't give Emma what she needed. Not on her own, not with her pride intact, not without help she didn't want to ask for. The realization felt like defeat. 2 days later, Mara walked to Cole's house. She'd gotten the address from Mrs. Henderson, who'd been only too happy to provide it along with a 20-minute lecture about propriety. The house was small by wealthy standards, but still nicer than anything Mara had ever lived in. Wood frame, painted white, with a porch and actual curtains in the windows. It sat at the edge of town, where Red Hollow started giving way to open territory. Mara stood at the gate for a full minute before forcing herself to walk up the path and knock. Cole answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there was ink on his fingers. Behind him, she could see papers spread across a table. Mara. Surprise and something else, hope, maybe, flickered across his face. I need to talk to you. Of course, come in. She stepped inside and the difference hit her immediately. The house was clean but lived in, books on shelves, a fire in the hearth. It smelled like coffee and paper and something indefinably masculine. Sit, Cole said, gesturing to a chair. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine. Mara remained standing. This isn't a social call. I didn't think it was. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Emma needs to be somewhere else. Somewhere with clean air and quiet. Dr. Harrison says the medicine is working, but she can't fully recover in that room above the general store. Okay. I can't afford to move. Can barely afford where we are now. The words tasted like ash. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for what your family owes mine, what you said we were entitled to. You don't have to justify it. Yes, I do. Because if I don't, it feels like begging, and I've never begged for anything in my life. Cole's expression was careful. What do you need? A place. Somewhere Emma can recover properly. I'll pay rent once she's better and I can work more hours. But right now, I need help. Done. Just like that? Just like that. Cole moved to the table and shuffled through papers. There's a house, about 5 miles outside town. It belonged to one of my father's business associates. He abandoned it after the mine collapse. Couldn't face the families, apparently. It's been sitting empty for 6 years. He found the document he was looking for. It's yours. I can't accept a house. Why not? Because that's too much. Too much compared to what? Your father's life? Emma's health? All the years you've spent surviving in a town that should have taken care of you from the beginning? Cole's voice was firm. Mara, stop thinking of this as a gift. It's restitution. It's a fraction of what you're owed. If I take this, what does that make me? Someone who puts her sister's life ahead of her pride. The words hit hard because they were true. Mara looked at the papers in Cole's hand, the deed to a house, to a future, to everything she'd needed for 6 years. What do you get out of this? She asked quietly. The knowledge that Emma has a chance to actually recover. That's all. That can't be all. Cole set down the papers and met her eyes. Fine. I get to feel like maybe, just maybe, I'm not entirely my father's son. I get to sleep at night knowing I did something right instead of just inheriting wrong. And I get... He stopped. What? I get to see you without that wall between us, even if it's just for a moment, even if you still hate me. I don't hate you. You should. I know. Mara picked up the papers, her hands shaking. This doesn't mean I forgive you. I know. And it doesn't mean we're friends or anything else. I know that too. Then why do you look so happy? Cole's smile was small but genuine. Because you're here. Because you asked for help instead of suffering in silence. Because maybe, just maybe, you're starting to believe that I mean what I say. Mara wanted to argue, but exhaustion and relief and the weight of 6 years of survival made her honest. I don't know what I believe anymore. That's okay. You don't have to know yet. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mara folded the papers carefully and tucked them into her pocket. When can we move in? Tomorrow if you want. I'll arrange for everything you need, furniture, supplies, whatever Emma requires. I can't. Yes, you can. Stop fighting every kindness like it's an insult. Kindness in Red Hollow usually comes with teeth. Then it's a good thing this isn't kindness. It's a debt being paid. Cole's voice softened. Let me do this, Mara. Let me help without you torturing yourself over what it means. She wanted to keep fighting, but Emma was dying slowly in that cramped room, and pride was a luxury Mara could no longer afford. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay. The relief on Cole's face was almost painful to see. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon. The house is fully furnished, but if there's anything specific Emma needs, she needs books and good light for reading, and maybe, Mara's voice caught, maybe a real bed. She's been sleeping on that cot for so long. She'll have all of that, I promise. Mara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned to leave, but Cole's voice stopped her. Mara? Yes? Thank you. For what? For trusting me. Even a little. Even when I don't deserve it. She looked back at him, this complicated man who represented both tragedy and hope, and felt something shift in her chest. Don't make me regret it, she said. I'll do everything I can not to. Mara left before the moment could become something more. But walking back to town, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Maybe months. Maybe 6 years. The house was real. Emma would have a chance to recover. And Cole Ashford had kept every promise he'd ever made, even when those promises cost him pieces of himself. That night, Mara told Emma about the house. Her sister's face lit up with something that had been missing for too long. Hope. A real house? Emma's voice was breathless. With clean air and quiet and as many books as you can read. Mara, that's incredible. It's what we should have had all along. Emma reached for her sister's hand. You talked to him? Yes. And? And he's helping, that's all. That's not all, but I'll let it go for now. Emma's smile was knowing. When do we move? Tomorrow. Tomorrow? Emma laughed, the sound clear and bright. That's so soon. Is that okay? It's perfect. Emma squeezed Mara's hand. Thank you for swallowing your pride, for asking for help. I know how hard that was. You're worth it. So are you. I hope you know that. Mara didn't answer. Because she didn't know that. Wasn't sure she'd ever known that. But maybe, in this house 5 miles outside of Red Hollow, with clean air and quiet and the space to breathe, she could start figuring it out. The move happened quickly. Cole arranged for a wagon and driver. He didn't come himself, some instinct telling him Mara needed space, but his absence was somehow louder than his presence. The house was everything he'd promised, and more. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, windows that let in actual light. The furniture was simple but sturdy. Emma's room had a proper bed with clean sheets and a bookshelf already filled with novels. Mara stood in the doorway, watching Emma touch everything with wonder, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. It's perfect, Emma whispered. Yes. He did this. For us. For you. To help you get better. No. Emma turned to face her sister. He did this for both of us. Don't pretend otherwise. Mara didn't answer. Because Emma was right. And admitting that meant admitting things Mara wasn't ready to face. That night, in her own room with an actual bed and the quiet she'd dreamed of for years, Mara lay awake and thought about Cole, about the careful way he'd kept his distance, about the promises he'd kept, about the investigation he'd started that would expose his own family's crimes, about the way he'd looked at her in the general store like she was the only thing that mattered. It terrified her, because caring about Cole meant risking everything, meant opening herself up to hurt deeper than any she'd known, meant believing that maybe, just maybe, some debts could be paid and some guilt could be transformed into action and some impossible things could become real. She didn't know if she was ready for that. But lying there in the darkness, listening to Emma's steady breathing from the next room, Mara admitted something she'd been avoiding for weeks. She wanted to be ready, wanted to see where this impossible thing between her and Cole could go, wanted to believe that tragedy and hope could exist in the same space, tangled together and complicated but real. It was the most terrifying thought she'd ever had, and maybe, just maybe, the most honest. The house changed everything, and Mara hadn't been prepared for that. Emma thrived in the clean air and quiet. Color returned to her cheeks, her cough lessened. Within 2 weeks, she could walk the perimeter of their small property without needing to rest. Dr. Harrison, on his weekly visits, actually smiled, something Mara had never seen before. But the house also meant something else. It meant Cole was woven into every part of their new life. Every comfortable bed, every filled bookshelf, every moment of peace existed because of him. And Mara didn't know how to reconcile gratitude with the anger she felt she should still be carrying. 3 weeks after the move, Cole came to visit. Mara was in the kitchen when she heard the horse approach. She looked out the window and saw him dismounting, moving with that careful control that seemed built into his bones. Her heart did something complicated, a jump followed by a twist of anxiety. She dried her hands and went to the door before he could knock. Cole. Mara. He stayed on the porch, hat in hand. I hope this isn't a bad time. I wanted to check on Emma. She's reading. She's always reading now. Mara stepped back. Come in. Cole entered slowly, like he was walking into a space he didn't quite belong. His eyes swept the main room, the furniture he'd provided, the life he'd made possible. It looks good, he said quietly. Lived in. That's what happens when people actually live somewhere. Emma appeared in the doorway to her room, a book tucked under her arm. Mr. Ashford, I thought I heard voices. Emma, you look well. I am well. We're getting there anyway. Emma's smile was genuine. Thank you for all of this. Cole's expression softened. You're welcome. Are you reading anything good? Everything's good when you haven't had the energy to read for months. She held up the book. This one's about a woman who disguises herself as a man to fight in a war. It's ridiculous and wonderful. Sounds perfect. An awkward silence fell. Emma looked between her sister and Cole, then made a decision. I'm going to sit on the porch and read. The light's better out there. She grabbed a shawl and headed for the door, pausing to squeeze Mara's arm. Be nice, she whispered. Then she was gone, leaving Mara and Cole alone in the main room. She's doing well, Cole said, filling the silence. Better than I dared hope. And you? How are you doing? The question surprised Mara. Most people asked about Emma, but never about her. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Mara moved to the kitchen, needing something to do with her hands. I don't know how to answer that question. Honestly would be a good start. She picked up a dish towel and began wiping down the already clean counter. I'm grateful and confused and angry at myself for not being angrier at you. She paused. How's that for honesty? It's a start. Cole leaned against the doorframe, keeping distance between them. The investigation is moving forward. The federal investigators arrived last week. They've been going through the mine records. Will it actually change anything? Yes. Already 3 mine operators have been arrested. The inspectors who took bribes are facing charges. It won't bring anyone back, but it might prevent the next collapse. Mara set down the towel and turned to face him. Your father's name will be destroyed. Your family's reputation. Good. It should be. Most men would protect their family's name. Most men didn't watch their father build an empire on other people's suffering. Cole's voice was hard. I spent my whole life benefiting from that empire. The least I can do is make sure everyone knows the truth. Even if it costs you everything? What does it cost me? Money? I have more than I need. Social standing? I never wanted it. The approval of people who valued profit over human life? He shook his head. That's not a cost. That's a relief. Mara studied his face, looking for performance, for the careful mask, but all she saw was exhaustion and conviction. The town's talking about you, she said, calling you a traitor to your class. Some are calling you worse. Let them talk. Doesn't it bother you? No. You know what bothers me? Cole's eyes met hers. That it took me 32 years to do the right thing. That I spent decades benefiting from my father's choices without questioning them. That I'm only here now because guilt finally outweighed comfort. That's still more than most people do. It's the bare minimum of human decency. In Red Hollow, the bare minimum is revolutionary. Something like a smile crossed Cole's face. Fair point. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Mara spoke, her voice careful. Why did you really come today? To see how Emma was doing. And? Cole's jaw tightened. And because I can't seem to stay away. I tell myself it's about checking on Emma's recovery, but that's only half true. He paused. I'm here because being near you makes me feel like I'm doing something right with my life for the first time ever. And I know that's selfish and complicated, and probably the last thing you want to hear, but you asked for honesty. Mara's breath caught. Cole, I'm not asking for anything. I know I don't deserve... He stopped, frustrated. I just needed you to know. That's all. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending. Tired of keeping careful distance and acting like this is just about restitution. It stopped being just about restitution weeks ago, and we both know it. The air between them felt charged. Mara's heart was hammering, her mind spinning through 100 responses and landing on none of them. I don't know what you want me to say, she managed finally. Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. I just... Cole ran a hand through his hair. I'm making this worse. I should go. No, The word came out before Mara could stop it. Don't go. Cole froze. Mara, I don't have this figured out. I don't know how to separate what you've done from what your family did. I don't know if I'm supposed to hate you or thank you or something in between. She took a breath. But I know I don't want you to leave. What does that mean? I have no idea. The honesty hung between them, raw and uncertain. Then Cole laughed, a short surprise sound. We're a mess, aren't we? The worst kind. So what do we do about it? Mara considered. 6 years of survival had taught her to think strategically, to weigh every decision against potential cost. But standing here in this kitchen, with Cole looking at her like she mattered more than anything else in the world, strategy felt like cowardice. We could try being honest, she said slowly. Actually honest. About what we want and what scares us and what this actually is. What is this? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Cole's expression shifted, hope mixing with caution. That's dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Fair point. He took a careful step closer. Okay, honesty. You first. Mara's pulse quickened. I'm terrified. Of you. Of this. Of what it means to care about someone whose family destroyed mine. I wake up angry at myself for not being angrier at you. I look at Emma getting better and feel grateful and guilty at the same time because accepting your help feels like betraying my father's memory. And despite all that, I can't stop thinking about you, about the way you see me, about how you stood up to Dawson and started that investigation and keep every promise you make even when it costs you. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I don't know if that's enough to build anything on, but it's the truth. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. My turn? Your turn. I came to Red Hollow to pay a debt. To make restitution for my father's sins. I had a list of families and a plan to work through it systematically. He paused. Then I met you, and everything got complicated. You were supposed to be another name on the list, another debt to settle. But you looked at me like I was just a man, not an Ashford, and for the first time in my life, I felt like myself. Cole, I'm not finished. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm terrified too, that I'm being selfish, that helping you is just another way of taking what I want, that I'll ruin this before it even starts because I don't know how to be anything except my father's son. He took another step closer, but when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I could learn, like maybe being better is actually possible instead of just a fantasy, I tell myself. The space between them had shrunk to almost nothing. Mara could see the exhaustion in Cole's eyes, the hope he was trying to contain, the careful control starting to crack. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. Probably. We're going to hurt each other. Almost certainly. I'm not ready for this. Neither am I. Then why are we doing it? Cole's hand came up slowly, giving her time to step back. When she didn't, he touched her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. Because some things are worth the risk. Mara's eyes closed. Every survival instinct screamed at her to pull away, to protect herself, to remember who he was and what his family had done. But underneath all that was something simpler and more powerful. She wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted to believe that complicated and messy could still be real. The door opened and Emma walked in, then stopped abruptly. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. I can go back outside. Mara stepped back from Cole, her face flushing. No, it's fine. We were just talking, Cole finished smoothly. I should go anyway. I've taken up enough of your afternoon. But Emma's eyes were knowing and a small smile played at her lips. Of course, just talking. Cole headed for the door, then paused. Mara, could I come back? Tomorrow, maybe? We could talk more. Yes. The answer came easily this time. I'd like that. After he left, Emma sat down at the kitchen table with her book, not even pretending to read. So, she said, don't. I'm not saying anything. You're thinking very loud things. Emma grinned. He's in love with you. He's not. That's not. Mara fumbled. It's complicated. Love usually is. It's not love, it's just, we're just figuring things out. Right, and the way he looked at you was just friendly interest. I'm happy for you. Emma's voice turned serious. Really. I know it's complicated and messy and probably the last thing you expected, but Mara, you deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who sees you the way he does. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to know. You just have to try. Mara sank into the chair across from her sister. What if it falls apart? What if we can't make it work? Then it falls apart. But at least you tried. At least you didn't let fear make all your decisions. Fear has kept us alive. Fear has kept us surviving. There's a difference. Emma reached across the table and took Mara's hand. You've spent 6 years making sure I stayed alive. Let someone take care of you for once. I don't need taking care of. Everyone needs taking care of, even you. Mara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because maybe Emma was right. Maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to risk something bigger than just making it through another day. Cole came back the next day. And the day after that. Each visit started careful and ended honest. They talked about everything. His father's business practices, her years at the saloon, the investigation, Emma's recovery. They argued about whether justice was possible after tragedy. They laughed about the absurdity of their situation. Slowly, carefully, something built between them. Not smooth or easy, but real. 2 weeks into this new pattern, Cole arrived with news written all over his face. The investigation concluded, he said without preamble. The report goes public tomorrow. Mara set down the bread she'd been kneading. And 34 counts of criminal negligence, 17 counts of bribery, 9 counts of manslaughter. The mine operators are facing prison. So are the inspectors. He paused. My father's name is listed as the primary architect. Everything he did, every corner he cut, every bribe he paid, it's all documented. How do you feel about that? Relieved. Angry that he's not alive to face consequences. Guilty that I'm relieved. Cole's laugh was bitter. All of it at once. That sounds exhausting. It is. He looked at her directly. There's something else. The report recommends restitution for all the families affected. Real restitution. Enough to actually matter. How much? Cole named a sum that made Mara's knees weak. That's too much. It's not even close to enough. But it's what the law requires. Cole, I can't accept that kind of money. Yes, you can. And you will. Because it's not a gift. It's a court-mandated settlement. You don't have a choice. Mara sank into a chair. That kind of money changes everything. Yes. Emma and I could leave Red Hollow, start over somewhere else, build an actual life. Yes. Something in his voice made her look up. Cole's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. You think we should leave? She said slowly. I think you should do whatever's best for you and Emma. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give without being selfish. Mara stood and crossed to him. Be selfish. Tell me what you want. I want you to stay. The words came out rough. I want you to stay here and let me prove that I'm more than my father's mistakes. I want time to show you that what's between us is real and worth fighting for. But that's selfish because you should go. You should take that money and leave this place that's given you nothing but pain and build something better somewhere else. What if I don't want to leave? Then I'll thank every power that exists and try to deserve you staying. You can't earn me, Cole. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Mara reached up and touched his face, the gesture still feeling new and dangerous and right. I stay because I want to. Because what we're building matters to me. Because leaving would feel like running, and I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. She paused. But I need you to understand something. What? This doesn't erase what happened. That money doesn't make us even. Your father's crimes aren't canceled out by your attempts to fix them. I know. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something real even with all that history between us. Maybe it doesn't have to be simple to be true. Cole's arms came around her, careful and certain at once. Mara let herself lean into him, let herself feel the warmth and solidity and strange safety of being held by someone who saw all her jagged edges and stayed anyway. I have to tell you something, Cole said into her hair. What? I'm in love with you. Mara's breath stopped. Cole, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know. He pulled back enough to look at her face. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably the worst timing possible, but I can't keep pretending what I feel is anything less than it is. You're right. It's terrible timing. I know. And it's too soon. I know that too. And I don't know if I can say it back yet. That's okay. Mara looked at this man who'd turned her life upside down, who represented both her family's tragedy and her sister's survival, who'd chosen truth over comfort at every turn. But I might get there, she said quietly. Eventually, if you're patient. I can be patient. Can you really? Because I'm a mess, Cole. I'm angry and scared, and I don't trust easily, and I might never fully forgive what your family did. I don't need you to forgive. I just need you to try. Try what? This. Us. Whatever we're building here. Mara thought about it. About the house they stood in and the life it represented. About Emma healthy and laughing in the next room. About the investigation that had exposed truth and demanded justice. About 6 years of survival and how maybe, just maybe, it was time for something more. Okay, she said. Okay? I'll try. We'll try. But I have conditions. A smile tugged at Cole's mouth. Of course you do. I need honesty. Always. Even when it's hard. Done. I need space sometimes. When things get too heavy and I need to process alone. Understood. And I need you to stop acting like you're trying to earn me. I'm not a debt to be paid or a redemption arc to complete. I'm just a person trying to figure out if what I feel for you is real. Cole's expression turned serious. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, just do better. I can do that. Then we have a deal. Cole kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise. Mara kissed him back and felt something in her chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming. Like maybe letting someone in wasn't the same as giving them power. Like maybe trust could be built even on complicated ground. When they broke apart, Emma was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and a satisfied smile on her face. Finally, she said, I was starting to think you two would dance around each other forever. How long have you been standing there? Mara asked, flushing. Long enough. Emma's smile softened. I'm happy for you both, really. Even though it's complicated? Everything worth having is complicated. Emma came into the room and hugged her sister. Besides, if we can survive 6 years in Red Hollow, we can survive a little complexity. That night, after Cole left and Emma went to bed, Mara stood on the porch and looked out at the territory stretching beyond their small property. The moon was bright enough to see by, and the air carried the scent of sage and possibility. 6 years ago, her father had died in a mine collapse caused by greed and negligence. 6 years ago, her life had narrowed to a single focus, survival. But standing here now, in a house paid for by the family responsible for that collapse, with her sister healing in the next room and her heart opening to a man she should hate but couldn't, Mara realized something profound. Survival had been necessary, but it was no longer enough. What came next would be harder and more complicated and infinitely more terrifying. It would mean trust and vulnerability and risking the heart she'd kept so carefully protected. It would mean building something with a man whose very existence was tangled up in her family's tragedy. But maybe that was okay. Maybe complexity was just another word for real. Maybe messy and imperfect could still be beautiful. Mara thought about her father, about his laugh, his strength, the way he'd lifted her onto his shoulders and promised her the world. She thought about what he'd want for her now, not revenge, not endless anger, not a life lived in the shadow of what had been taken. He'd want her to live, really live, to take the moments of joy when they came and build something worth having, even if it was complicated. Inside the house, Emma coughed softly, then settled back into sleep. The sound that had terrified Mara for months now just meant her sister was alive and healing. Across town, Cole was probably sitting at his desk with his papers and his guilt and his determination to be better than he'd been raised to be. And here, standing between them both, Mara Vance made a choice. She chose to try, to risk, to believe that maybe, just maybe, some debts could be paid, and some wounds could heal, and some impossible things could become real. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A beginning. A chance. And in Red Hollow, where chances had always been scarce, that felt like everything. The morning Cole asked Mara to marry him, nothing felt romantic about it. They were in the barn behind the house, both covered in dust and sweat from fixing a damaged stall. Emma's horse, a gentle mare Cole had bought 3 months ago over Mara's protests, had kicked through the wooden slats the night before. Mara was hammering a new board into place when Cole spoke. "Marry me." She hit her thumb instead of the nail and swore. "What?" "Marry me." Cole held out another board, his expression serious. "I know it's not a proper proposal. I know I should have planned something better, but I can't wait anymore." Mara set down the hammer, her heart hammering harder. "Cole, we've been together 6 months. I know. That's not enough time. For most people, maybe, but we've lived more in 6 months than some people live in years." He set down the board and faced her fully. "I love you. You know that. And I think you love me, even if you won't say it yet. So marry me." "That's not how proposals work." "How do they work?" "There's supposed to be romance, planning, some indication that you've thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else for 3 months. Cole's voice was rough. "I wake up thinking about it. Go to sleep thinking about it. Spend every moment we're apart wondering if you'll ever trust me enough to say yes." Mara picked up the hammer again, needing something to do with her hands. "This isn't fair." "Why not?" "Because you're asking me to marry into the family that killed my father, to take the Ashford name, to be okay with all of that. I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm asking you to build something new, despite it." "That's easy for you to say." "Nothing about this is easy." Cole's frustration was showing now. "You think I don't know what I'm asking? You think I haven't spent every day since we met questioning whether I have any right to want this?" "Then why are you asking?" "Because I'm tired of letting my father's sins define my entire existence. Because you're the first good thing I've ever done that wasn't motivated by guilt. Because when I think about my future, you're the only thing in it that matters." Mara's hands were shaking. She set down the hammer before she dropped it. "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know. More than this. More than a barn proposal while we're covered in dirt." Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Okay." "But, Mara?" "What?" "I'm not going to stop asking. Maybe not every day. Maybe not even every week. But I'm going to keep asking until you either say yes or tell me there's no chance. That's not fair either. Love isn't fair. If it were, we'd have never met." He left her standing in the barn with sawdust in her hair and a heart that felt too big for her chest. Mara finished fixing the stall alone, hitting nails harder than necessary and trying not to think about marriage and names and futures built on complicated ground. That evening, Emma found her sister sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. "He asked you, didn't he?" Mara didn't pretend to misunderstand. "How did you know?" "The way he looked when he left. Like someone who jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if he'd fly or fall." Emma sat down beside her. "What did you say?" "That I needed time." "Do you?" "I don't know." Mara's voice cracked. He wants me to marry him, to take his name, to be an Ashford." "So don't take his name." The suggestion was so simple it stopped Mara cold. "What? You don't have to take his name. Plenty of women keep their own names, or make a new one together. The name isn't what matters." "Then what does matter?" "Whether you love him, whether you trust him, whether you can see a future that includes both of you." Emma took her sister's hand. "Do you love him?" Mara was quiet for a long time. Then, quietly, "Yes." "Have you told him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because saying it makes it real, and if it's real, I can lose it." "You can lose it whether you say it or not." Emma's voice was gentle. "Mara, you've spent 6 years protecting yourself, protecting me, never letting anyone close enough to hurt you. But Cole's already close. Refusing to admit it doesn't make it less true. I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'll marry him and wake up one day hating him for what his family did. That every time I look at him, I'll see my father's death. That the weight of all that history will crush whatever we're trying to build." "That might happen," Emma said honestly, "or it might not. But you won't know unless you try." "What if trying breaks everything? What if not trying does?" Mara leaned her head on her sister's shoulder, exhaustion and fear and love all tangled together. When did you get so wise? When I stopped dying and started paying attention to what actually matters. Emma squeezed her hand. You deserve to be happy, Mara. You deserve someone who sees you and loves you and wants to build a life with you. Cole is that person. The question isn't whether his family history makes that impossible. The question is whether you're brave enough to try anyway. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. They're just terrified people who do it anyway. That night, Mara lay in bed and thought about Cole's proposal, about the barn and the sawdust and the complete lack of romance, about how perfectly it summed up what they actually were. Two people building something real in the mess of daily life, not some fairy tale where love conquered all, and history didn't matter. She thought about her father, about what he'd want for her, and she realized something that felt like truth. He wouldn't want her to be defined by his death, wouldn't want her to spend her life angry and alone because justice for him meant rejecting happiness for herself. He'd want her to live, to love, to take the good when it came, even if it arrived in complicated packaging. But that didn't mean she was ready to say yes. Not yet. Not when the weight of the Ashford name felt like drowning. A week later, the restitution money arrived, the official settlement signed by territorial judges and backed by federal authority. The sum was staggering, enough to live comfortably for years, enough to start businesses, enough to never worry about survival again. Mara stared at the bank documents spread across the kitchen table, her hands shaking. This is real, she whispered. Emma stood beside her, equally stunned. What do we do with it? I have no idea. That evening, Cole came to visit. He'd been giving Mara space since the proposal, but she'd asked him to come see the settlement documents. He sat at the table, reviewing the papers with the careful attention he brought to everything. It's all in order, he said finally. The money's yours, no strings, no conditions. What you do with it is entirely your choice. Mara took a breath. I want to do something with it, something that matters. Like what? A clinic, here, on the property, with a real doctor who'll treat people whether they can pay or not, and a fund to help families who've been affected by mining accidents. Not just here, throughout the territory. Cole's expression shifted, surprise mixing with something that looked like pride. That's ambitious. Father died because poor workers don't matter to rich men. I want to change that, or at least make a dent in it. She looked at him directly. But I can't do it alone. I don't know how to set up clinics or manage funds or navigate territorial regulations. I do. I know. That's why I'm asking if you'll help. Of course, whatever you need. Not as my future husband, as my partner, my equal, someone who works with me, not for me. Understanding flickered in Cole's eyes. You're setting terms. I'm being clear about what I need. If we're going to do this, build something together, whether it's a clinic or a life, I need to know we're equals, that my voice matters as much as yours, that your money and your name don't make you the one in charge. They never did. I know. But I need to say it anyway, need to hear you agree. Cole stood and came around the table. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could see the honesty in his eyes. You're not my employee. You're not my charity case. You're not some debt I'm paying off. His voice was firm. You're the person I love, the person I respect more than anyone I've ever met. And if you'll let me be part of what you're building, I promise to follow your lead and support your vision without trying to take over. Even when you think you know better, even then, though I reserve the right to argue with you when I disagree. I wouldn't want you any other way. A smile tugged at Cole's mouth. So we're doing this? Building a clinic? We're doing this. Together? Together. The clinic took 8 months to build. 8 months of arguments and compromises and learning to work as a team instead of two people trying to manage alone. They fought about design, about staffing, about how to publicize services without making people feel like charity cases. They fought hard and honestly, and then they figured it out. Emma helped, her health fully restored, and her energy channeled into organizing the Family Assistance Fund. She developed a system for identifying mining families in need and distributing aid discreetly. She was good at it, better than Mara had expected. Turns out almost dying gives you clarity about what matters, Emma said one day, reviewing applications at the kitchen table, which is helping people who are where we were, terrified and alone and running out of options. She looked up. We could have died, Mara. Without Cole's help, I would have died. This is our chance to be that help for someone else. The clinic opened on a cold November morning. Dr. Harrison agreed to serve as the primary physician, joined by a younger doctor fresh from medical school who'd heard about the project and wanted to be part of something meaningful. The building was simple but well equipped. The staff was small but dedicated. And on opening day, 17 people came through the doors. Minors with chronic coughs, children with fevers their parents couldn't afford to treat, women who'd been suffering in silence because medical care cost too much. They came cautiously, unsure if this was real or just another false promise. But it was real. And word spread. Within 3 months, the clinic was seeing 50 patients a week. The Family Assistance Fund had helped 23 mining families stay afloat after accidents or layoffs. Letters arrived from throughout the territory, people thanking them, asking for help, wanting to know how they could start similar programs in their own towns. "We're making a difference," Emma said one evening, going through the latest reports. Mara looked at the numbers. Lives improved, families helped, hope restored, and felt something shift in her chest. This was what the money should have done from the beginning. This was justice that actually meant something. "Father would be proud," she said quietly. "He would be. But Mara, you should be proud too. You did this." "We did this?" "You started it. You had the vision. Cole and I just helped make it real." That night, Cole found Mara standing outside the clinic, looking at the building in the darkness. "You okay?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Better than okay. I was thinking about 6 years ago, about how hopeless everything felt, how surviving was the only goal that mattered." She turned to look at him. "I never imagined this. Never imagined that something good could come from something so terrible. It came from you, not from your father's death, from your refusal to let that death be meaningless. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. It might have taken longer, but you would have found a way. That's who you are." Mara was quiet for a moment, then, "Ask me again." "Ask you what?" "You know what." Cole's breath caught. "Mara, ask me again, right now. In front of this clinic we built together. Ask me." Cole turned to face her fully. In the darkness, his expression was serious and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because it makes sense or because enough time has passed. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend my life building things with you. Because you make me better than I ever thought I could be. Because when I think about the future, you're the only thing in it I'm certain about." "What about the name? The history? All the complicated mess we can't change?" "We'll figure it out, together, like we've figured out everything else." Mara took a breath. "I have conditions." "Of course you do." "I'm keeping my name, Mara Vance, not Ashford. I'll be your wife, but I won't be defined by your family's history. Done." And we put it in writing. The clinic, the fund, they stay independent, not controlled by you or your family's money. They're mine, ours, but separate. "Agreed." "And you promise, really promise, that you'll never make decisions for me, that we'll always be partners, even when it's hard?" "I promise." Mara looked at this man who'd turned her life upside down, who represented both tragedy and hope, who'd proven over and over that actions mattered more than heritage. "Then yes," she said, "I'll marry you." Cole kissed her then, and Mara kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside for months. Love and trust and the terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, they could actually make this work. When they broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Cole said, "You love me." "I do." "Say it. I love you." The words came easier than she'd expected. "I love you, Cole Ashford, even though you're terrible at romantic proposals and your family history is a nightmare and you drive me crazy with your need to fix everything. That's the most beautiful declaration I've ever heard. Shut up. Make me." She did. They married in spring, a year after Cole first walked into that saloon in Red Hollow. The ceremony was small, just Emma, Dr. Harrison, a few clinic staff, and the territorial judge who'd overseen the investigation that changed everything. Mara wore a simple dress, Cole wore his best suit, and Emma cried through the entire thing. "You may kiss your bride," the judge said. Cole did thoroughly, and the small gathering applauded. Afterward, Emma hugged her sister so tight Mara could barely breathe. "I'm so happy for you." "Are you sure?" Mara pulled back to look at her sister. "I'm married now. Things will change." "Things have been changing for 2 years. This is just the next step." Emma's smile was genuine. "Besides, someone needs to keep you two from working yourselves to death. I volunteer." "You're staying?" "Of course I'm staying. You think I'd miss watching you build an empire of clinics throughout the territory? Not a chance." As it turned out, Emma wasn't wrong about the empire part. Over the next 5 years, they opened 4 more clinics in mining towns throughout the territory. The Family Assistance Fund expanded to cover educational costs for miners' children. They lobbied the territorial legislature for better safety regulations, and won. Cole testified before congressional committees about mining practices, using his father's documents to push for federal oversight. The work was exhausting and never-ending, but it was also meaningful in ways survival had never been. Mara and Cole's marriage wasn't smooth. They argued frequently, sometimes explosively. He wanted to move faster. She wanted to be more careful. She wanted to help everyone. He reminded her they had limits. They compromised and fought and made up and kept building. But through it all, they stayed partners. Equals. 2 people who'd come together through tragedy and chosen to build something better. Emma thrived. She took over the administrative side of the clinics, proving to have a gift for organization and management. She never married, said she was too busy changing the world to bother with romance, but she was happy, really happy. 3 years after the wedding, on a morning that started like any other, Mara woke up feeling strange. Not sick exactly, just different. "I think I'm pregnant," she told Cole at breakfast. He dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the floor. Are you sure?" "No, but maybe. I don't know." Mara looked at the broken cup. "Is that excitement or terror on your face?" "Both, definitely both." "Same." They sat in silence for a moment, looking at each other over the broken cup and the spilled coffee, both thinking about what a child would mean, about bringing someone new into their complicated legacy, about whether they could be good parents when they were still figuring out how to be good partners. "We'll figure it out," Cole said finally. "Like we figured out everything else?" "Exactly like that. Messily and imperfectly, and hopefully with fewer broken dishes." Mara laughed, and Cole came around the table to pull her into his arms. "We can do this," he said into her hair. "We'd better, because I'm not doing it alone. Never alone, I promise." Their daughter was born in winter, 8 months later. She had Mara's dark hair and Cole's eyes and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. "She's perfect," Emma said, holding her niece for the first time. "She's loud," Mara corrected, exhausted and sore and happier than she'd ever been. "That too." They named her Grace, not after anyone in particular, just because after everything they'd been through, Grace felt like the right word for what they'd been given. Grace grew up running through the clinic, learning to read from patient files, absorbing the work her parents did like it was the most natural thing in the world. At 5 years old, she announced she was going to be a doctor. At 7, she changed her mind and decided she'd rather run 10 clinics. "That's my girl," Mara said, watching Grace organize her dolls into elaborate hospital scenarios. 2 years after Grace, they had a son, Michael, named after Mara's father. Cole insisted, and for once, Mara didn't argue. "He should know where he comes from," Cole said, holding his son for the first time. "All of it, the good and the bad, the tragedy, and what we built from it." "Will you tell him? About your father? About the mine collapse?" "We'll tell him together, when he's old enough to understand." Cole looked at Mara. "And we'll tell him the truth, not a sanitized version, the real complicated truth. Even the parts that reflect badly on you? Especially those parts. He needs to know that trying to be better matters more than being born good." Michael grew up quieter than his sister, but just as determined. He loved numbers and systems and finding efficient ways to do things. By the time he was 10, he was helping Emma manage the clinic budgets. "Your son is going to run a business empire someday," Emma told Mara. "As long as it's a good empire, I don't care." The years passed. The clinics expanded. The regulations they'd fought for saved lives. The mining companies fought back, of course they did. But Cole and Mara fought harder. Red Hollow changed too. The town that had chewed Mara up and spit her out slowly became something different. Not perfect. Never perfect, but better. The saloon where Mara had worked closed. Samuel drank himself to death and no one wanted to buy the place. The mine implemented better safety protocols. Workers started organizing for fair wages. Some changes came from the clinics and the advocacy work. But some came from something simpler. People seeing what was possible when someone actually cared about changing things instead of just accepting them. On Emma's 30th birthday, healthy and thriving and managing 3 clinics simultaneously, she gave a toast at dinner. To my sister, who never gave up even when giving up would have been easier. To Cole, who proved that where you come from matters less than where you're going. And to proving that survival isn't the end goal, it's just the beginning. Mara raised her glass, her throat tight with emotion. To family, the one you're born with and the one you choose. To building things that matter, Cole added. And to being stubborn enough to believe you can, Emma finished. They drank to that, and Grace and Michael joined in with their milk glasses. And for a moment, everything felt right in a way Mara had once thought impossible. 10 years after their wedding, Mara and Cole stood on the porch of a house much larger than the one they'd started in. The clinic empire had grown to 12 locations. The Family Assistance Fund had helped over 300 families. Cole's testimony had led to federal regulations that made mining safer throughout the West. Their children were inside with Emma, arguing about something only siblings could find worth arguing about. The evening was warm and the territory stretched out before them, wild and complicated and full of possibility. Do you ever regret it? Cole asked quietly. Saying yes. Taking on all of this. Mara thought about it honestly. About the hard days and the fights and the weight of trying to change systems that didn't want to change. About the night she'd lain awake worrying about money or regulations or whether what they were doing actually mattered. No, she said finally. It's been hard. Harder than I ever imagined, but I don't regret it. Even the parts where I drive you crazy? Especially those parts. They keep me sharp. Cole laughed and pulled her close. I love you. I know. You tell me every day. And you tell me back? I love you. Mara leaned into him. I love you and our messy life and what we built from tragedy. I love that we proved something good can come from something terrible if you're willing to work for it. We did prove that, didn't we? We're still proving it, every day. Inside, Grace shrieked with laughter and Michael yelled something about unfair distribution of dessert. Emma's voice rose over both of them, calm and amused. Should we rescue Emma? Cole asked. Probably, but let's stay here for one more minute. So they stood together on the porch, watching the sun set over the territory they'd helped change, and thought about how survival had transformed into something bigger, how tragedy had become the foundation for purpose, how 2 people from impossible circumstances had built something worth having. Mara thought about the girl she'd been 6 years ago, exhausted, terrified, desperate. She thought about that girl serving whiskey to men who barely saw her as human, counting pennies, watching her sister die slowly. That girl had survived. But this woman, standing on this porch with her husband and her children and her sister and her life's work, this woman had done something more. She'd lived, really lived, not just made it through the days, but built days worth living. And that, Mara thought as Cole kissed her temple and Grace's laughter rang through the house, was the only kind of victory that actually mattered. Not erasing the past, not pretending tragedy didn't happen, but refusing to let tragedy be the only thing that defined you. Taking the broken pieces and building something new, something better, something that honored what was lost by creating what never existed before. Grace appeared in the doorway. Mama, Michael says I can't have his portion of pie, but you made the pie for everyone, so I think that's unfair distribution of resources. Michael, stop hoarding pie, Mara called into the house. She already had 2 pieces, Michael yelled back. And you ate all the whipped cream yesterday, so we're calling it even. Emma emerged behind Grace, smiling. Just so you know, they've formed an alliance and are now planning to raid the pantry for cookies. Let them, Mara said. We'll make more cookies. That's your solution to everything. It's worked so far. They went inside together, all of them, this family built from choice and tragedy and stubborn hope. They ate too many cookies and argued about fair distribution and cleaned up the mess together. And later, when the children were finally asleep and Emma had gone to her room to read, Mara and Cole sat in their bedroom and looked at each other across the space they'd built. Thank you, Cole said quietly. For what? For saying yes. For believing me when I said I wanted to be better. For building this life with me even when it would have been easier to walk away. You did the same for me. You saw me when no one else did. You helped Emma when you didn't have to. You spent years proving that actions matter more than history. We saved each other. No. Mara shook her head. We saved ourselves. We just did it together. It was a subtle distinction, but an important one, because Mara had learned that saving yourself wasn't weakness. It was the hardest kind of strength. And choosing to build something with someone else wasn't giving up independence, it was multiplying it. They'd both brought their own strength to this partnership. Both contributed equally to what they'd built. And that made the life they'd created together stronger than anything either could have managed alone. That was the real lesson, Mara thought as she fell asleep beside her husband. Not that love conquered all, or that tragedy could be erased, or that happy endings came easy. The lesson was simpler and more profound. You could survive the worst moments of your life and still build something beautiful. You could carry grief and still make room for joy. You could be broken and still be whole. And sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes, the person tied to your greatest pain could also become tied to your greatest hope. Not because the pain disappeared, not because history stopped mattering, but because human beings were complicated enough to hold both at once, to honor the past while building the future, to remember what was lost while celebrating what was found. Mara Vance had started with nothing but survival. She'd ended with purpose, family, and a legacy that would outlive her. She'd turned tragedy into transformation and pain into power. And in a world that tried to grind people like her into dust, that felt like the most revolutionary act of all. Outside, the territory slept under starlight. The clinic stood ready for tomorrow's patients. The assistance fund waited to help the next family in crisis. Grace and Michael dreamed their ambitious dreams, and Mara and Cole rested in the life they'd built, messy and complicated and imperfect and absolutely undeniably real. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined 6 years ago, but it was better. Because it was hers, built on her terms, created from choices instead of circumstances. And that made all the difference.